Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about archaeology and its relationship with social media, which is a video I have been planning on making for quite some time, but haven't had the chance to yet for various reasons. It's also probably going to be quite a long video because it's a really complex issue, so I apologize if it gets a bit rambly at times. The reason I decided to make it is because I've gotten a couple questions from people about if I can talk about some of the sites I've mentioned I've worked on or post some photos on them, if I can do a video of my day when I'm at work. And so I just kind of wanted to answer those questions for you today and also delve into the kind of really complicated relationship archaeology has with social media. First of all, why is social media important in archaeology? I think that's a pretty obvious answer. I think it's pretty obvious why social media is important in modern day. It's a way for people to connect with an audience. It's a way to get your message across. A lot of people hear about things first through social media. And it's a way, it's quickly becoming like one of the top ways for us to communicate with each other. So obviously it is really important for archaeologists to communicate with the wider population, especially in terms of the fact that we tend to get a bit stuck in the ancient world. And this is a way for us to kind of expand into the modern day world. However, we're not that good at it. And this is for a variety of reasons. I think one of them is probably because a lot of companies and projects are run by an older generation that isn't as social media savvy as somebody who is my age or younger, and so they don't see it maybe as being as relevant or necessary as others would. Additionally, I think it has a bit of a reputation of as being like, I don't know, unprofessional, but not quite like, you know, if you're publishing something or reporting on something, you should be putting it in a journal or a newspaper rather than putting it on social media. But nowadays, you know, people don't read newspapers as much, and the only people who read academic journals are academics. You need a way to communicate to the general populace rather than just like a select group of people. And so some of you might ask, like, why do we want to do that? And I think it's a pretty obvious answer. Archaeology really struggles with being taken seriously by the wider public. I think a lot of people think that we just do it as a glorified hobby. And additionally, we have, I've always had this impression that we always have to really fight with people to justify them giving us funding for stuff, or to just justify us like being on a site. And additionally, we also need to be able to generate a interest so that we're bringing people into our workforce. And this is especially relevant right now because we are experiencing a bit of a drought of people coming into the workforce here in Britain. They just don't have enough people to fill the amount of projects that we currently have. And part of that is because we are not actively recruiting enough of like the youth population within the universities and even outside of the universities in the UK. Because, I mean, so many people say to me, oh, you're an archaeologist? That's so cool. I wanted to do that with it when I was a kid. But nobody ever really considers it as being like a serious profession. And I think social media can go a long way to fixing that image so people actually realize that it is an actual profession that you can do outside of having to be a university professor. We need social media in order to help promote ourselves as a profession. However, we need to do it in a way where we maintain a like professional facade in a way, because we need to be taken seriously. We need to maintain a certain standard when we're talking about things. So a lot of the times this will lead to companies or institutions having their own like company run Twitter page or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and they will post stuff on there like, you know, oh, this is the find of the week, photo of the week, this is a link to our news story, this is this, which is a really great thing, and it goes a long way to getting people interested. But again, I think it's really limited in terms of the audience that it gets. And as well, I mean, me personally, I think that it can come off as being really contrived sometimes. because they're putting like a veneer. They only talk about the really cool stuff. They don't talk about the negative stuff. And I think that people are interested in both. They want to have a balanced view, an honest view of what things are like. And like a company is never going to give you that honest view because they only want to make themselves look good so that they get contracts and tenders for projects. So that's part of why I started this YouTube channel, so I can talk about these things with you guys honestly. I try not to bitch about stuff too much because, you know, everyone can have a bad day at work and then go home and be like, ah, and then regret it the next day. And I also want to kind of help bring people into the profession, but at the same time, they're having a realistic expectation of what they're going to get out of this job. And I want to also kind of communicate that archaeology isn't just something that's done by a bunch of pensioners who have a lot of time on their hands, who have as a hobby. Like, it's done by a lot of young people. So why don't I really post a lot of specific stuff about my job? There's a couple reasons for this. The first one concerns just essentially copyright. So within my work contract, it states that I do not own any of the information or data that I discover or whatever while I'm on this job. All of it belongs to the company. And similar to an academic institution, it is their research, and therefore it is their right to publish it. And nowadays, social media counts as publishing. So if I were to post something from my site before my company has had a chance to release it as like part of a press release or part of a publication and stuff like that, then I could get fired. In some ways, if I've left the job, I could probably even get sued for that. And personally, I don't really want that to happen, so that's why I don't do it. I would like to be able to show you guys some of the really interesting stuff that happens when I'm at work or gets found while I'm at work, but I'm just really not allowed. If it's been released to the news, I'm certainly allowed to talk about it because people already know that it's out there. And whenever there is something interesting that gets released to the news and I think is a credible news story, which is another thing entirely, I will certainly let you know about it. And unfortunately, just the way that things work, I can't be just like posting on Instagram or whatever anytime I find something cool or anything that's really going to tell you anything about the site that you can gain any information about that you could potentially like write about, if that makes any sense. Another reason is just general like professionalism, because a company always wants to, like I was saying, a company always wants to present the picture perfect image of itself to the public. And so this is why I don't generally talk about which companies I've worked for by name, which sites I'm working on, or like where exactly I'm working, so that you cannot Google where I am and then make inferences about where I'm working from that. Because if I were to say post a picture of me doing something that, you know, doesn't exactly follow health and safety guidelines, and then on that post to tag the company I'm working for, the site that I'm working on and everything, and then the client, somebody who's giving us money, sees that and sees that we're doing something that could potentially get them fined or something like that, then they're going to be really pissed off, and the company that I work for is going to get in trouble, and again, I'm going to get fired. So I don't really want to put myself in that situation. Not to say that I regularly violate health and safety stuff, just as a precaution, like I don't. You always try and make sure that you're following that stuff because you never know when a supervisor is walking around who's going to catch you when you're doing something wrong. I also don't generally talk about where I'm working as a just general personal safety thing. I don't think any of you are going to actually stalk me, but in the general case that something like that ever happens, I don't want to give somebody information about where I am. And that's just my own personal choice. The last reason that that I don't generally post stuff, which I've touched on briefly before, is just general security. And this is in relation to the site. So one of the biggest problems that we have in archaeology is that people like to loot sites because they think that they're going to be able to find something valuable to sell on the black market or just to sell, and it's going to be easy money for them, which generally is never gonna be true. So we have this thing that happens to us, which is called night hawking, where people with metal detectors will come onto your site and they will try and find gold and or silver, valuable precious metals, in order to sell. And it can be a real problem. You also have people that just blatantly don't listen to signs and or fencing that tells them they cannot be on site, and will just go for a nosy walk around site to see if they can see anything cool. Which again, both of these actions will potentially contaminate our site and or ruin some of the information that we are trying to obtain. So in this way, we generally aren't allowed to post stuff about where we are on site, or pictures that like, you know, show street signs or landmarks so that you can easily figure out where we are. And while, you know, sometimes it's really obvious that there's an archaeological dig going on, some people are just oblivious and they won't notice it unless it's pointed out to them. So we don't really want to point it out. Generally, when archaeologists like to talk about what they've discovered, it will be way after the fact, after they've finished the actual excavation and they've gotten everything that they need out of the site, and they're no longer bothered about who's walking around. In this way, we don't want to like attract attention to a site while there's potential for it to be contaminated, and we try to always post stuff after the fact. I have this tendency to talk about our discoveries way after we've discovered them for a couple of different reasons. Like I said, it's partly to prevent looting of a site. It's also something to do with the fact that like we want to look professional when we are releasing stuff to the news. I've been on a lot of sites, and when you find stuff, when you find something interesting, everyone will gather around and you'll just kind of look at it and be like, oh, I wonder if it's this. Oh, I wonder if it's this. What if it's this? I'm not sure. And then you all kind of play a bit of a guessing game. It gets taken out of the ground. It gets sent to a specialist who proves either all of you wrong and says it's something completely different. And then it'll officially get released to the public once it's been cleaned, analyzed, and all this other stuff. So if somebody were to be there while we're all guessing about what this mysterious thing might be, a reporter could really easily just pick out one of those things and put it in a news story, and then that would be published. And then later, when it comes out that that is completely wrong and bollocks, it looks really bad. So we really want to make sure that when we're releasing stuff to the press, that we're releasing the correct information and that we are not propagating incorrect ideas. So that's why I haven't really talked too much about the specifics of when and where I'm working somewhere. I also want to talk about the fact that archaeology has a really hard time connecting with just like the general public, not just other archaeologists and people interested in archaeology. And I think this is also for a couple different reasons, one of which is because we can be a bit snobby about stuff sometimes. So because we're an academic discipline, we tend to use really highbrow language when we're talking about stuff. And I think this really alienates a lot of regular people because not necessarily they don't understand it. It's the way that we speak about stuff and the language we use, it can be really boring sometimes. There's ways to talk about it so that it's really exciting, and then there's ways to talk about it where it's really boring, but the way that it's really boring sounds like really professional and like really fancy. So people generally choose that. And we have a hard time presenting stuff in a way that like people identify with it. We also have a problem with the fact that a lot of archaeologists aren't exactly the most extroverted people you have ever met. And we can be a bit awkward when we're on the news sometimes. I know also a lot of people don't like having the news on site. They see it as this thing that's keeping them from doing their job or interrupting their work, and they don't like it, and they feel awkward about it, and they don't like being in front of camera, instead of seeing it as a way to promote the business, promote the discipline, and get across to the everyday people that watch the news and to make them see that what we're doing is interesting. So I think that really does not help the situation at all. We need a couple, like, more kind of mascots than just, you know, Indiana Jones, Lara Croft, and Time Team. We need regular people to talk about things in a way that other people will understand it, to help like communicate these ideas. And that's partly what I am trying to do here. Like, I think archaeology is really interesting, and a lot of people are missing out on some really cool stuff by thinking that it's just like boring history. So I'm hopefully going to start some videos about some weird stuff in archaeology or weird stuff in history that, you know, either never gets mentioned, people overlook it and stuff like that. If you're interested in me doing these kinds of videos, please let me know in the comments below. The last thing I want to talk about today is just some general advice for people in archaeology on digs and stuff like that, and how you should approach social media, because obviously when you're on a dig, you're going to be finding stuff that's really interesting and cool, and you're going to want to show your friends, you want to show your family and stuff like that. If you are interested in posting something on social media, okay it with your supervisor first. Do not just take a picture and post it on Snapchat, Instagram, whatever. That can get you in a lot of trouble, because people do check these things, and it can get you fired, kicked off site, and stuff like that, especially if it's something like really, really, really valuable. If you want to post stuff, generally that's okay, but you need to make sure that it's okay with somebody first, just to avoid getting in trouble later. That's the end of this video for today. As per usual, I hope it's been informative for people. I hope you liked it. Please leave me any comments or questions that you have down below. If you want to see more videos from me, please watch the rest of them and subscribe. My Instagram and Twitter are also below if you're interested in following me on there. And I will see you guys next week. All right, bye.